I think the one thing he might want to focus on is beating Patrick Mahomes. I think that's been his sort of Achilles heel.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon. The NFL powered by Verizon 5G. And y'all, we made it. We're here. Happy Thursday. Happy kickoff of the 2024 NFL season. We have got a loaded Week 1 preview for you. You're still not out of time. If you're new, if you haven't done it, please subscribe to the show. Give us a follow on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you get your NFL news. It is time. Jam-packed show. Of course, we're going to get to the big matchup tonight, Thursday night, Chiefs, Ravens, Kansas City. We're going to talk about the Brazil game, the Eagles playing the Packers on a Friday night. How about checking in with America's team? Of course, the Dallas Cowboys opening up against the Browns. Tom Brady's broadcasting debut. Did I mention Aaron Rodgers is making his return on Monday Night Football against the 49ers? We're going to get to all of them. We're going to have something for you on every matchup in a loaded Week 1 schedule. So buckle in, sit tight. If you're in your car, if you're out for a walk, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Make sure you comment, try to get some engagement going with us. We'll write back when we've got time. Lot to get to. I mentioned all the previews. Before we do that, it is the time of year where some last minute business is getting done before these games start. Teams love to do a deal. So let's jump into all of that. Quite a few things going on, starting with the latest. That would be Patrick Surtain, the star cornerback in Denver, agreeing to a 4-year, $96 million extension on Wednesday morning. The cornerback market was at $21 million a year. Pat Surtain jumps it up to $24 million a year overnight. Big news if you're a corner, because that receiver market continues to escalate. It's at $35 million a year. It's nice to see the cornerbacks gaining some ground. This was expected, long time coming. Good on the Broncos for getting it done a year ahead of time. We'll see Pat Surtain on Sunday against the Seattle Seahawks. Let's move it to one of the most anticipated signings. I think we all saw it coming. Over the weekend, the San Francisco 49ers agreed with a deal for Brandon Ayuk. Now, this week, the next big piece of business gets done. Trent Williams agrees to a restructured contract, got $48 million guaranteed at signing. I believe I read he's got $27 million in cash guaranteed this year. It's Trent Williams getting the bag that we thought he would get. So, yeah, that's what happens when you're a team with Super Bowl expectations. You don't get it all the way to the season. Trent and Brandon Ayuk both under contract. Hopefully brings a close to the tumultuous news in San Francisco. I'm sure you saw the news as well over the weekend. Unfortunately, first-round draft pick Ricky Pearsall was shot in a robbery attempt in San Francisco. Trent Williams mentioned part of the reason he wanted to end his holdout and get back to the team was to be there to support the rookie. Just a wild summer in San Francisco, hoping for the best for Ricky Pearsall. Very excited that Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk are back under contract. And if you needed any more good news, Christian McCaffrey also back at practice. He will be ready to go. Missed a lot of training camp with a calf strain, but after all of that, the Niners will have all of their all-pros, all of their most talented players on hand, ready to play. That leaves just a few unresolved situations as far as contracts go. Hopefully this doesn't age poorly. We're recording on a Wednesday night. As of right now, Ja'Marr Chase does not have a new deal in Cincinnati, but he did report to practice on Wednesday. Was officially listed as limited on Wednesday as the Bengals scramble to try to get a deal done with their star. Reportedly, he wants to set the top of the receiver market over his college teammate, Justin Jefferson. He's been at the facility this entire time, had not practiced. He is now at practice. We will see how this ages. Obviously, a big deal for the Bengals, whether their star receiver is available. Tentatively, I'm going to say that it looks good. I'm sure if you're a Ja'Marr Chase fantasy manager, you're going to be sweating it out. But Jamar Chase doesn't strike me as the type of guy that needs a long training camp. I'm going to hold my breath and hope that he's available against New England. We'll see how it goes. Whether or not they have Jamar, I think one of the big storylines. Two other things to get to. That just leaves one true holdout. It's if you forgot about him, I don't blame you because the guy hasn't hardly been seen all summer. But now Haason Reddick, the star Jets pass rusher, the last guy left unsigned, hasn't reported to camp, hasn't offered comment. The New York Jets getting ready to play the 49ers on Monday Night Football. Haason Reddick has racked up almost $5 million in fines as he seeks a new deal. All-pro caliber player the last couple years with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was traded to the Jets in the offseason. Very interested to see how Robert Saleh deploys his pass rush if Reddick doesn't play and if this holdout stretches deep into the season. We'll see how it goes. One last bit. Again, we'll see how this ages. We know the Dallas Cowboys have been talking to Dak Prescott about a contract extension because it's been a storyline for basically a year and a half. Just a few more days until the Cowboys take the field in Cleveland against the Browns. Some optimism that a deal can still get done by Sunday afternoon. Still nothing as of yet. So again, we'll see how this ages. But Jamar Chase, Haason Reddick, Dak Prescott, I think three last names to be focused on contract-wise before the season starts. We'll see if there's any movement as we move on into Thursday, Friday, maybe even Saturday. All right. That does it for housekeeping. All right, enough with the news, enough with the housekeeping. Let's get into our week one preview, a loaded slate of games in week one, none bigger than tonight, the season opener. The Thursday night opener is always going to be a banger. They're always going to give the defending champion somebody good to play, but this one feels especially nice. The two-time reigning champion, Kansas City Chiefs, welcoming the Baltimore Ravens. You've got Patrick Mahomes, two-time MVP winner. The Kansas City Chiefs, back-to-back Super Bowl champs, 3 out of the last 4 championships, a modern dynasty in the making. Can they go for the three-peat? You've heard it all before. You've got Lamar Jackson, just the 11th multiple-time MVP, the reigning NFL MVP from last season. The Baltimore Ravens, who were so close to being the team of the year, number 1 seed in the AFC, 13-4, destroyed essentially all comers right up until a heartbreaker of a loss in the AFC Championship game to these Kansas City Chiefs, who went on the road and did the damn thing in Baltimore en route to another title. Now the Ravens go into Kansas City where they will watch the Chiefs raise a banner that just might have been theirs with just a few more plays. It's electric. It's exciting. Season openers don't get better than this. That's why our very own Fox Sports' Henry McKenna will be on hand at Arrowhead for just, I'll say it again, a banger of a matchup. But Henry, let's start here because you make the very astute observation that for all the hype, for all the anticipation, for all the talent on these teams, for it to be a rivalry, don't the Ravens have to win a little bit more often than what we've seen?
Yeah, I love this game, by the way. Let me just say that. And let me also say, thank God football is almost back. Thank God football is here. But yes, this rivalry is not really a rivalry. Patrick Mahomes is 4-1 against Lamar Jackson. And while I do think, like you said, both have won MVPs, both are individually extremely successful, this has been a very one-sided set of matchups with Mahomes being the sort of king. I think Lamar has in so many ways a monkey on his back. He wants a Super Bowl, but and there was a great feature in The Athletic that went out today about how badly he is focused and desirous of that Super Bowl. But he doesn't like to acknowledge other quarterbacks in the league. He doesn't really like to acknowledge other quarterbacks that have played the game. He likes to focus on himself. I think the one thing he might want to focus on is beating Patrick Mahomes. I think that's been his sort of Achilles heel. I mean, it's so many quarterbacks in the NFL's Achilles heel, but 4-1 is it's got a way to go.
I think it's an interesting point, and it speaks to not to discredit him, but the infatuation with Joe Burrow, I think, revolves around the fact that Joe is the one guy that has managed to get one over on Patrick Mahomes, other than our own Tom Brady, who is now a broadcaster and is no longer Patrick Mahomes' rival. But I mean, Joe Burrow missed 2 seasons due to injury, no All-Pro designations, but that one magical run to the Super Bowl in 2021 was something that Lamar has not been able to do. Josh Allen has not been able to do. So I get your point. It would, of course, it's not going to replicate playoff success, but I think it would mean a lot for Lamar to go in there and get a win over this team. It would be their second win over the Chiefs and their first since 2021, when they did win a nail biter over the Chiefs early in that season. I don't think you can overreact to the narrative aspect of things, but personally, it would give me a lot of confidence, especially with what the Ravens have lost. You know, Mike McDonald is a head coach elsewhere now. You lost Patrick Queen. You lost Geno Stone, their safety, who tied for the league lead in interceptions. Lost him to a division rival. Offensive line is completely retooled. I personally expect at least somewhat of a regression from the Ravens this year. Maybe only 1 or 2 wins, but I think it's going to be an uphill battle for the Ravens to repeat as the 1 seed in the AFC. Maybe I'm completely wrong, though, if this team is good enough to go on the road in Kansas City and get a win in a game like this.
I don't think I'm picking the Chiefs in this game, first of all. And I think that's because Lamar has 3 new offensive linemen. I love the addition of Derrick Henry. And don't get me wrong, that boosts the offense. He is sort of like the perfect guy to bring into that group for this season, given all of the things that we know about that Ravens offense. To have such a big, powerful presence alongside Lamar's sort of like lightning quickness and speed, that's just a really hard combination of skill sets to defend. But the blocking's got to be there. And, you start 2 new guards after 2 departures, and then you've got a rookie likely at right tackle. So I'm just a little worried about that group. Chris Jones is on the other side of the ball. I think we've all heard of him. He just got a huge freaking contract. That guy is a beast. And, I know Derrick Henry is and has long been the beast of the NFL, but Chris Jones is kind of like that new monster in town. I mean, he's been around for a few years. He's been the monster. I just don't know whether that matchup can actually be a sort of a winning combination for the Ravens. I actually think it's probably the losing combination. It's the reason the Chiefs lose. And then to make things more complicated, I would say that you said, maybe it's good to see the Ravens get this W. I feel like I'm absolutely the picture of doom and gloom for Baltimore right now, but I'm going to kind of continue in this bit that I've got, which is like Josh Allen's beaten Patrick Mahomes plenty of times in the regular season. Like the last 2 years, I'm pretty sure he's beaten Patrick Mahomes. But guess what? We get to the postseason and it's the same old story. Patrick Mahomes figures out how to beat Josh Allen. So I'm not totally sure that this is what gets the monkey off the back for the Ravens, but more than anything, like you said, I do want to see this Ravens offense do sort of like what we've imagined was possible with the Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson combination. And then, you did take down the world champs and you set your season off on a good mark. And, we heard the Harbaugh chirp about how he wants to make Lamar the greatest quarterback of all time. There's another guy on the other side of the ball striving to do exactly that, and with accolades that actually might get him on the trajectory to do it. So I don't know. Maybe we finally get that going.
Shameless chance for self-promotion, because you're doing a weekly quarterback ranking for Fox Sports this season. And I was surprised in a good way to see that you are with me on this island. I have so much respect for Lamar, 2-time MVP, incredible quarterback. But in your ranking at the top, of course, we're going to say Mahomes number 1. But you and I agree that Josh Allen goes at number 2 with Lamar Jackson at number 3. I'm curious what your rationale is. Is it getting past Patrick Mahomes? Is it simply finding more postseason success? What do you need to see from Lamar to elevate him at least into that number 2 spot?
It's a little bit of everything there that you mentioned. I think the other thing is the rankings are based slightly on projection too, where it's like, let's evaluate what we saw last year, but also think a little bit about what we suspect is going to happen this year. And as I mentioned, I'm a little bit concerned about that offensive line for Lamar. And given that he's lost a lot of weight this offseason, in the athletic feature, he went so far as to say that he felt like he was getting fat last year. So he slimmed way down. That's combine that with the offensive line that they have right now, that worries me a little bit. And you ding up Lamar Jackson, and that worries me even more, just if that ends up happening, right? So that's why I kind of like have Josh Allen sort of neck and neck in their unique, incredible abilities. Just think this is the year Josh Allen really steps up. I actually picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl this year. And my editor was like, with what receivers? And I was like, well, you could have said the same thing about Patrick Mahomes last year, right? So I think this is the year that Josh Allen really establishes himself as sort of like a truly great generational quarterback, gets out of that shadow that he's been standing in behind Patrick Mahomes. And I think this is the year that the Bills have kind of like figured out the right recipe of making it work. And that sounds crazy because they just got rid of Stephon Diggs. But if you looked at their game plans in the second half of the season, you'd see a major absence of Stephon Diggs, that they were sort of like getting ready in a weird way for this departure. And it looked pretty good, actually, on offense. I think they're going to have some growing pains at the beginning of the year, but they proved last year they can storm into sort of the finish line in the AFC East. More complicated with the Jets, but that's sort of like the bigger picture look at why I think, why I like Josh Allen a little bit more, just a little bit more than Lamar right now.
It is the smallest possible margin. But yeah, I mean, for me, and I get it, Josh Allen hasn't gotten over the hump in the playoffs himself, but I trust the performance that much more. I mean, Josh Allen, passer rating of 100 on average in his playoff games, 26 total touchdowns to 6 total turnovers in the postseason. Lamar, passer rating of 76 in the playoffs, 6 total touchdowns, 9 total touchdowns, 9 total turnovers. The performance in the postseason is a stark difference, and we're splitting hairs, but that's what you have to do when you're talking about the second best quarterback in the NFL. I'd love to see it if Lamar Jackson can elevate his game. Unfortunately for him, he is one of those very unlucky players who is in the situation of only the postseason, I think, is going to drastically change anybody's opinion, because clearly in the regular season, he's one of the very best doing it in the NFL. You mentioned Chris Jones. I do think something that's always going to fly under the radar with the Chiefs. It doesn't matter that Kansas City's defense dragged them to a title last year. They're always going to fly under the radar when Patrick Mahomes is on the other side of the ball. Are we underrating the loss of L'Jarius Sneed on this Chiefs defense? Is Chris Jones enough to compensate for that? I think Trent McDuffie is a name worth knowing heading into this season, kind of replacing Sneed as that go-to cornerback. How do you feel about the potential drop-off on defense in Kansas City, or is there even going to be one?
There will be one. The weird thing is that I'm not sure the Ravens have the right group of players to exploit it, but we'll probably see that weakness. The second cornerback spot, like you said, so Trent McDuffie is going to move he was predominantly actually the slot guy for
Right.
KC last year, and they're going to move him outside to take on L'Jarius Sneed's role. So even there's some certainty. McDuffie was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, but he had a very different role. The slot role is almost like a totally different position than a perimeter cornerback. So you've got that unknown. And then add in the second cornerback spot is actually going to be filled probably by Jalen Watson. But the reason I say probably is because basically all of their cornerbacks have been banged up during training camp. And so they plan to hold, not formally, but like they plan to hold a open competition for that spot. and everybody got banged up. So the competition never really came into play. So it's likely we'll say 3 players rotating in and out of that second cornerback spot. Right now, it's probably matching up against Rashad Bateman, so it's not like the most intimidating matchup in the world, though, he's solid. I just traded for him in Dynasty, so I got to kind of pump him up a little bit. But my team is very bad in Dynasty. And so
don't sell yourself short. I'm sure it's fine.
The matchup, I think that second cornerback spot, we're going to learn something on Thursday night. Not just like how well those guys can play, but also like who's going to play. Like how much is this snap share going to kind of move around between these guys? So yes, that is sort of my long-winded way of saying absolutely this team is going to miss L'Jarius Sneed. It is a real sort of like domino effect down that depth chart of cornerbacks. And I hope we see Lamar really test those guys early and often.
I think you almost have to, but I hear you. It does sound like McDuffie's going to play much more outside this year. I'm so interested to see if and how much of a matchup there is with Zay Flowers. Obviously, a phenomenal rookie season in Baltimore. I'd say he's their best pure receiver option when you're not talking about tight ends. And remember, it was in the AFC title game last year. Zay Flowers' fumble at the very beginning of the fourth quarter on the goal line, recovered by none other than Trent McDuffie, who was dealing with him a lot in that matchup. So Zay moves inside and outside. I hope that Trent McDuffie spends a lot of time where Zay Flowers is in this game, because I think that could be a heck of a fun matchup to watch on that side of the ball.
True. And like you said, actually almost the best acclimation game for McDuffie, right? If he's a slot guy that played some outside and he's going to match up against their number 1 receiver, who's not exactly a slot guy, but does a little bit everything, that's kind of perfect, right? You kind of get to ease McDuffie into his number 1 role with a guy that isn't like a true perimeter player in Zay Flowers. So yeah, I mean, more good things kind of lining up for the Chiefs. But I do think that second spot, like, it's going to be a vulnerability, and it's going to be a vulnerability like well beyond this week, right? Like it's going to go into multiple weeks where they really have that unsettled. The only thing that really, like, the Chiefs fans are probably like screaming through their earbuds is like Steve Spagnuolo just like figures stuff out. You know what I mean? It's sort of in the same way that, like, probably Ravens fans are like, well, Harbaugh's going to figure out our offensive line, right? I think that like that sort of thing sort of sorts itself out on specific teams. So
I think Steve Spagnuolo is definitely in that category of coach where if he tells me he can figure it out, I believe it. But to your point, the Chiefs get the Bengals in week 2, so this will be something to have a close eye on. All right, Henry, you spoiled it for me. You already told me you were taking the Chiefs, which no fault there, but I am curious. If the Ravens find a way to win this game, and for the record, the defending champions are 15-5 in the last 20 years, so the home team is a safe pick. But if the Ravens are going to steal one here, where do you see that coming? Is it the vulnerability with the Chiefs secondary, or what do you see going right for them if they do find a way to win?
Yeah, well, another player that the Chiefs lost was Willie Gay, a linebacker. I think Derrick Henry, and let's say that offensive line, all this concern that I have, I'm wrong, and that those guards block the heck out of that Kansas City interior. And then Derrick Henry has a great game. It's exactly sort of like what Harbaugh, wanted to put together and have this like, pound. I mean, it's like they have every element of the rushing game that you could possibly want. And then you just throw off of that. And maybe you're throwing a lot at the second receiver and the tight ends. We haven't even mentioned Mark Andrews, right? That all makes sense. And so I certainly have thrown some storm clouds over Baltimore, but there's absolutely a recipe for them to really take control of this game through the focal point of their offseason, which really is Derrick Henry. Like, it's just like doubling down on what they do so well. So that, and then, Patrick Mahomes, he doesn't have Marquise Brown. That's he's going to be out this week. Xavier Worthy, unclear whether he's ready to be that perimeter guy, that speedy, not Tyreek Hill, but kind of Tyreek Hill option. And And Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce are total possession guys. So, like, we could see Patrick Mahomes do a lot of dinking and dunking, but, like, let's say he wants to push the ball to Xavier Worthy just to see early season. Why not throw the ball up, third down? Maybe we see the Ravens capitalize and start to generate some turnovers after that sort of like testing mentality that Mahomes might have early in the year.
I'm not. I might have to steal that from you when I refer to Xavier Worthy from now on. Not Tyreek Hill, but maybe kind of Tyreek Hill. We'll see how it goes. I'm with you, man. I see the Chiefs winning this game, but like I said, even if the defending champs are 15-5 in the last 20, they're 0-2 in the last 2 years, including the Chiefs losing this game to Detroit just a year ago. So I'm not going to be surprised if the Ravens have something for the Chiefs. Either way, we will be checking in with you from the stadium on Thursday night. Can't wait for it. Henry, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll see you then.
Let's keep things pushing, and we don't have to jump that far. Right after Thursday night football this season, we will have a Friday night football. Yes, a Friday night week 1 opener. If you haven't heard, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers facing off in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The NFL going international in South America this season. Going to talk about that. We're going to get to a few other major matchups. But yeah, let's start with Friday. I hope you realize if today's Thursday, 4 of the next 5 days will have primetime NFL football. Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. Oh my gosh, it is nice to have the season back. And to start things off with this Sao Paulo game, let's bring in our guy, Fox Sports' own, Ralph Vacchiano. Ralph, we didn't get the invite down to Sao Paulo, I guess. I mean, you know, it would be nice to take in Brazil in addition to an NFL football game, but this will have to suffice, right?
At least, you know, I can tweet from here. So there's at least that benefit. You can't do that from down in Brazil anymore. So, you know, at least we can keep people updated on the game.
And look, Twitter is a valuable tool. Social media is a valuable tool for sending out news for, you know, injuries and updates from the game. But the way that people are reacting to not having Twitter in Brazil is a little bit amusing to me. Last time I checked, the game will still be available to watch. Like, I think we can make it through in this time of crisis.
And I think the reporters who are down there, they're going to kind of remember what it was like in the old days when, you know, you could just sort of watch the game instead of tweeting every play and every injury. You know, it's going to be a little cathartic for them, I think.
What a novel concept, just watching and having to let people know later. Who would have thought? All right, I mean, you know as well as I do, the Packers and the Eagles entering this season with a ton of hype for very different reasons. Start on the Philly side of things. That's one of your areas of expertise. I think at this point, I don't need to rattle off all the names on this team, particularly on this offense. I mean, it's star-studded. There's 5 or 6 guys making tons and tons of money. My question for you is, we now get our first look at Kellen Moore putting this thing together in his first game as Philadelphia's offensive coordinator. It's going to change. He's going to adapt as the season goes. But here in week 1, what are you hoping to see? What do you need to see from the Eagles offense to give you confidence that things are back on track after last year?
You know, I'd like to see a little bit of the old Jalen Hurts. I think last season, towards the end, he did not look like a guy who was very in sync with the offense. He was, you know, running when he probably should have passed and throwing deep on situations where maybe he could have just run for a first down. You know, he just didn't seem to be making good off-schedule decisions. And not always off-schedule. Sometimes they're exactly what they said they would do, but are, you know, good decisions when he's out of the pocket, trying to create something that way. So I want to see him do that this time. I want to see him keep the defense off balance, not throw deep constantly, maybe, you know, a short pass over the middle and let his playmakers do something, you know, have him run when it's not in a panic, you know, some good designed runs, which I think could be a really good weapon. The RPO part of their offense with Saquon Barkley could make them really dangerous. So if he looks a little bit more like his old self, not as confused as he was at times at the end of last season, or at least at the way he looked at the end of last season, I think that'll be a good sign, because they've said all summer that he's looked in sync with the offense. He certainly looked good in practice and, threw one interception. And it was the last day of training camp. So everything, all the reports are good, but you want to see him when after they've game planned, when the plays are being called, if he looks like he's in sync, it looks like he's comfortable, it is comfortable, not uncomfortable. If he looks like he is comfortable, all of that will be something that bodes well for their future.
It's such an interesting point because 2022 Philly was such a big play offense, such a deep shot offense, and not every NFL team is going to take its shots, but Kellen Moore historically feasts on the intermediate part of the field, on the timing aspect of his offense, keeping things going in that 10 to 15 yard range. Do you see this offense looking fundamentally different, or who might Kellen Moore use to get that going? Obviously, you're going to have your pick of 3 different receivers now, really, with Jahan Dotson. Or you mentioned Saquon Barkley. I personally am so curious to see Saquon Barkley's role as a receiver, because I do think Kellen Moore could do a lot of fun things with him in that regard.
Yeah, I think they underused running backs as a receiver the last couple of years. I think that could change. Saquon Barkley definitely has the skills. Everybody remembers his rookie year. We had 91 catches, I think, with the Giants. Never quite duplicated that. And I think the Giants underused him. But I think that he could be a really good weapon, especially because, with the Giants, one of the reasons why it was hard to throw to him was they didn't have the offensive line to really set up screen passes. And also, when he went out for a pass, he didn't really have a lot of support with other terrific receivers. This Eagles team has that offensive line that can set that up for him. And they also have so many options for Jalen Hurts to throw to. It's really a puzzle as to what defense will focus on when they play the Eagles. And, if you can turn Saquon Barkley into a two-way threat, that adds a whole other dimension of the offense. And I do suspect that that's what they're going to try to do.
I'll ask you something similar for the Green Bay side of this. I mean, again, there are sky-high expectations for Jordan Love, and it's not always going to move in a linear fashion. I don't think you can expect Jordan Love to be as amazing as he was in the final 5-6 games of last season every single week. But against a team that most of us view as an NFC contender, what do you need to see from the Green Bay Packers, whether it's a win, whether it's simply Jordan Love looking like that guy? Maybe we'd like to see the Green Bay defense finally play up to its talent level. Feels like this is the 4th year in a row I've been saying that. Is there something in particular that would give you confidence that the Packers are the team that we think they are right now?
Well, all of that's important. I want to see them develop a running game. I want to see them have a running back that stays healthy, which obviously was a big issue with Aaron Jones all these years. Now there's Josh Jacobs. They've got that workhorse, they believe. They've certainly got the receivers, but, we can go through every little thing. And to me, it still does come down to Jordan Love because, you're right. It's never just linear for quarterbacks, or at least it rarely is just linear. But those last 5-6 games, whatever that stretch was, his stretch in the playoffs, gave so much hope that they're ready to arrive, that they can be a real Super Bowl threat. So I want to see what he can do with that. I want to see, can he build on that a little bit? Can he go out there against an Eagles defense that was very vulnerable last year, but, should be improved with Vic Fangio now running the defense? Can Jordan Love go out and have a big game, or is he going to take a step back at all? And obviously one game's not going to tell the tale on that, but I think if he gets off to a good start, he's going to have a lot of people in Green Bay thinking big.
All I can say for sure is when you consider the international scale and the audience and involving a new country in Brazil, and then you think about the size of these fan bases and the size of these expectations, whoever wins this game, I think, is going to be the narrative of week 1. And obviously that doesn't mean anything in the big picture, but whoever gets this win just might have more hype heading into week 2 than anybody in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, they're 2 powerhouses in the NFC, at least that's the way they're viewed. 2 teams that everybody think is going to win their division, that everybody thinks will compete for an NFC title. You got to throw the 49ers in there, obviously, the Detroit Lions, obviously. But the fact that these 2 are playing each other in this head-to-head battle, everybody always overstates the importance of week 1. But when you've got a battle like this, it's going to set the tone for a couple of weeks, and you will see one of these teams riding a little bit of the wave of hype, if nothing else.
Let's flip to Sunday afternoon. Not a night game, but one of the big primetime window games. Tom Brady's debut on Fox. the Dallas Cowboys heading up to Cleveland to take on the Browns, 2 playoff teams from a year ago. Ralph, obviously I spend way too much time right up close to the Dallas Cowboys. So I love getting other people's perspectives on this, because I sit here, I look at this. The Cowboys are a 2.5 point road underdog. They go up to Cleveland. The Browns are favored by 2.5 points. And I do think that the Browns, I think pound for pound, you could argue, have the better overall roster. Maybe you like CeeDee Lamb better than their receivers, or maybe you think that strongly about Micah Parsons. But 1-53, I think I like the Browns more than the Cowboys. But I do think Dak Prescott should probably give you a little bit more of an edge than this line seems to reflect when you consider what we've seen from Deshaun Watson to this point, which is not a whole lot. So, Ralph, I'm asking you, what do you value more, having the clear-cut better quarterback here, or maybe having the slightly better overall roster?
Well, the quarterback to me is always everything in the NFL, and that can certainly change a game. I'm certainly a little worried about the Cowboys, and I think that, my guess is whoever sets the lines is probably thinking that way too. This was not a great offseason for them. They have some big changes on the offensive line, obviously a big change at running back as well. There's some changes in their secondary. There's some issues that they've got to address. Now, I don't think they are remarkably worse talent wise than they were. I don't know if they've been 12-5, 3 straight years in a row. I don't know that they will be that again, but if they are, it's all going to be because of Dak Prescott. I do think he's, one of the top 10, maybe one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. I know that's not always the case when he gets to the playoffs, and that's something to consider, but in the regular season, he's terrific. That the matchup with him and CeeDee Lamb is as good as there is in the NFL. And, that he's, to me, is way better than Deshaun Watson, at least of what we've seen of him, even when he's healthy over the last couple of years. So if the Cowboys can actually protect him, which I'm not 100% sure about, I need to see this new offensive line, the changes that they made. But if they can protect him, yeah, I would put this game on Dak Prescott and say that matters more to me than the overall roster. But the offensive line is part of that roster too. So if that fails, the Cowboys could have some issues that could linger for, a lot more than just 1 week.
I got to shout out my good friend Derek Eagleton for this stat, which it's an eye opener to your point, Ralph. This will be the first time ever the Cowboys are projected to start 4 rookies in week 1. That's how good they thought about a few of these guys coming out of training camp. Some of that is necessity, though, because one of those is Kalen Carson, the cornerback who is stepping in for Deron Bland now that he's on injured reserve. And you also have the first-round pick, Tyler Guyton, starting at left tackle. So I'll give you a fun choice here, Ralph. Tyler Guyton going against Myles Garrett in his NFL debut, or Kalen Carson potentially dealing with Amari Cooper in his first game as an NFL corner. Which one do you feel better about?
I'll take feeling better about the rookie corner, because you can mask things in a secondary and give a guy help. But boy, Tyler Guyton out on that island against Myles Garrett is going to be really, really difficult. Obviously the Cowboys wanted to make that move, and we talked about their offseason all offseason long about how we don't really know what all in means, and we don't know why they were doing what they did. But that's one of the big gambles they took. A rookie left tackle is a difficult thing in this league. And they're hoping it's all they can do is hope that they got the right guy. But boy, that's this first test. There's not going to be a lot of ways to help him out. And that certainly worries me. And one of the big reasons why I think I shy away from the Cowboys a little bit. I think a lot of people do. And, some of that's the hype of the offseason. But, again, if Dak Prescott's not standing up, if he's rushed on a lot of his throws, it could be a very long game.
It's not often you go into a game and you're like, left tackle versus right end is what I have my eyes on immediately. I can't wait to see it. Tyler Guyton had an impressive preseason. Myles Garrett's a little bit of a different animal. If I had to guess, the Cowboys are going to have a tight end and probably Ezekiel Elliott stuck to his hip. Just chip Myles Garrett with whoever can get in the way and help this rookie have an easier afternoon. We'll see how he does it. One last one on this matchup, and it's the other big unknown, not necessarily a player, But Mike Zimmer, obviously returning to the NFL for the first time since 2021. I'm curious to see what he can do with Micah Parsons, the different ways he can use him. But my big thing that I have my eyes on here is how well do the Dallas Cowboys stop the run? You know, they're not playing safeties at linebacker this season. At least it doesn't look like it right now. They'll have some true, honest to God linebackers out there, probably helped by the fact that Nick Chubb is still recovering from injury. This feels like a test the Cowboys should pass. And if Mike Zimmer can't get better returns against the run against this Cleveland team, then I'm a little bit concerned about the big picture here.
Yeah, and they've tried to stock up late in the game on some defensive tackles and defensive linemen to help them out, which makes me think they might be a little bit concerned about it. But yeah, without Nick Chubb, the matchup becomes a little bit easier, I would think. But it's huge, and it makes me wonder. I keep looking at Micah Parsons, and I always wonder why he's not turned loose more on the quarterback. Because I think he could be a devastating pass rusher, but he's so good at so many other things. You can almost see the argument for using him everywhere, which sounds a little like what Mike Zimmer plans to do with Micah Parsons. And if you use him in run support as well, that's certainly going to help, wherever their weakness is. You can get to the quarterback in other ways and use him to keep the running game in check. So that's certainly the part of their defense I'll be watching. Obviously, the loss of Deron Bland is going to be important to them as well. I think they've got a pretty good secondary even without him. So that may be something that they can hide. But that run defense, that it failed them down the stretch last year at times, and certainly in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see if they fixed it again. Just like their whole all-in off season, it's not like they brought in a bunch of big names to try to fix it. They've sort of pieced it together, and we'll see if that plan works.
It is amazing. And I don't feel noticeably different about the Cowboys. I'm not saying Super Bowl or anything like that, but between the veteran additions, you meant, Linval Joseph, some of those guys, and then what we saw from the rookies during training camp, Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe, I'm a little more optimistic than I was 6 weeks ago, but a team with as much talent as the Cleveland Browns can change all of that in a real hurry. Just thinking about what Myles Garrett might do in a matchup like this, I can't wait to see it. Let's wrap this up. An under the radar game, a game that'll be happening at the same time as Browns Cowboys. That would be Jayden Daniels and the Washington Commanders going down to Tampa to face the Buccaneers. And Ralph, I'm not a gambling aficionado. It's not like my strong suit, but I'm always interested by a curious line. And I think it's very curious that the Washington Commanders, completely new team, they were bad enough to pick number 2 in the draft. They are starting a rookie quarterback, are only seen as a 3.5-point road underdog. And, people always say home field advantage is worth about 3 points in football. So other than home field advantage, Las Vegas sees this as a relatively even game. Am I crazy if I think that's strange? I mean, are we sleeping on the Commanders' potential, or am I overvaluing what Tampa Bay did last year?
Well, I look at that and I think that somebody's buying the hype of the Commanders a little too much. This is a team that completely overhauled its roster during the offseason, and they probably will, in the short run, maybe certainly in the long run, but maybe even in the short run, will make themselves a little bit better. They didn't bring in a lot of big names, but they brought in capable NFL quality players. But, again, not a lot of all pros, not a lot of Pro Bowlers, not a lot of big free agents. And they built this all around this kid quarterback who I think is going to be outstanding. But to bet on a rookie in his very first game with a team that's basically patchworked around him on the road against a playoff team, yeah, that seems to me like that line should be a little bigger than that. I'm not exactly sure what their logic is. I don't think the Buccaneers are a Super Bowl contender, but what they did last year was not a mirage. And Baker Mayfield had a terrific year. I don't think there's any reason to think that that won't continue. And with Jayden Daniels, it's with rookie quarterbacks, he could be CJ Stroud, I guess, and step in and be terrific right from the go. But that's not usually what happens with rookie quarterbacks. And he's got a big question mark in his offensive line in front of him. He does have some weapons, but they have some defensive issues too. The line is the thing that would worry me the most. I don't know that I would bet on a lot of success early from the Commanders, and playing a playoff team on the road is not a place where I would really bank on them having success. I think that line is just hyped a little too much.
Do I have your permission to be slightly reckless?
Sure, as long as it's not with my money.
Never. I would never. This is. I'm jumping to so many conclusions, but I can't help but think, Ralph, Jayden Daniels is the second rookie quarterback to start week 1 in Washington franchise history. The last time it happened was 2012, when the number 2 overall pick Heisman winner went on the road in week 1 and beat the reigning NFC South champion New Orleans Saints. The parallels are strange. That's all I'm saying. The parallels are a little bit eerie for me. And I know that that's not going to win the Commanders any matchups on the field, but I look at that. Maybe that's why the line is the way it is. Like you said, maybe people are just buying into the excitement a little bit, but maybe I'm one of them. I don't know.
Look, people do a lot of research with those lines. If they came across that, they might say, hey, we're onto something here. I don't remember what kind of an offensive line that team had, but if it was as bad as the Commanders' current line might be, then yeah, maybe there is something there. But that line, and again, going against a Bucs team with Todd Bowles is a really good defensive coach and defensive mind, that he's had time to prepare for Jayden Daniels. You have a sense, you don't know exactly what he's going to do, but you know what type of quarterback he is. It seems like a bad first matchup to me. And maybe I'm wrong and they'll go out and surprise everyone and history will repeat, but I don't know that I see that.
I tend to agree with you. I think the Bucs will win this game. Like I said, I think the line is strange, but stranger things happen in the NFL every week. One last quick question for you. I am just curious. I think by the time the Commanders finally traded Jahan Dotson, it wasn't that much of a surprise. You heard a lot of noise coming out of Washington about how they weren't overly thrilled with him. My only question is now, beside the obvious answer of Terry McLaurin eating up targets in Washington's offense, what's the number 2 option for the Commanders other than Jayden himself? I am curious of what the pecking order is here for this group.
Well, I think the number 2 and 3 receiver spots are going to end up being pretty wide open. But I think as far as options go, they really like what they saw to Zach Ertz this preseason, and he's a veteran tight end, and he's getting a little older, and that certainly doesn't bode well if he's not going to have 90 catches and over 1,000 yards. But he's sure-handed and could be a good target, especially for a quarterback who likes to run and throw off schedule. So he could be someone who could be a factor. And I wouldn't sleep too much on Austin Ekeler being a weapon out of the backfield. Brian Robinson is their workhorse first and second down back. But if you get Ekeler who, can be in the third down back and be that receiver out of the backfield, he's good in that role and can make a lot of people miss and, cause some damage. So I could see them making their number 2 option a tight end, running back type of thing, and then just figuring out the rest of the receivers. All of them, by the way, will really pale in comparison to Terry McLaurin, who'll probably get the lion's share of attention from Jayden Daniels, I would think.
My wonderful producer's reminding me, I never actually said the guy's name, but in case you were curious, way back in 2012, it was none other than Robert Griffin III. RG3 opened his career with a big win on the road at the Saints, a Saints team that made a playoff run the year before. I'm just saying, crazier things have happened. We will see how it goes. So excited to see how Jayden Daniels fares in his debut. Ralph, we will be checking in with you all season long. Appreciate your insight, my man. We'll catch up soon.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right, let's keep this week 1 preview pushing with one of the most exciting games of the early window on Sunday right here on Fox. That would be Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears making what feels like the most long-awaited debut in NFL history. They host the Tennessee Titans at Soldier Field, and my good buddy, Adam Amin, will be there to call it for Fox. He joins me now to talk some Bears-Titans. Adam, how you doing, my man?
All is well. Congrats to you and the growing family, my friend. I appreciate you very much.
I really appreciate that as well. Thank you. Which we're talking Chicago people, Chicago land. This would be an exciting game for anyone, but you're not just calling Titans Bears. You are a Chicagoland native. You grew up in the Chicago area. You live a few miles from Soldier Field. You are as well positioned as anyone to give us an idea. I mean, look, we know Chicago is excited about the Caleb Williams era, but now that we're here in game week, what are the vibes in Chicago? I mean, what is it actually like in that city as Bears fans finally get ready to watch Caleb Williams in a real NFL game?
I don't think it's much different than what a lot of people felt in Cincinnati when Joe Burrow got drafted in 2020, although I know it was a strange year with COVID and everything. When Trevor Lawrence got drafted by Jacksonville, I think even when, any first round pick is going to have a little bit of this type of polarizing fan base that half the people that follow this team and care about this team want to be arrogant and thrilled. Our buddy Danny Parkins, who's working on Breakfast Ball and FS1 now, he's all in on no, I'm excited about something. I'm excited about Bears quarterback play for the first time maybe in my lifetime. I'm all in. I think this guy's going to win 1 million MVPs, all that stuff. And then there's a lot of people who are trying to be very cautious about it because the track record of the city, at least for the last, I would say, decade minimum. And then if you really look at the broader picture relative to the rest of the league, going back 40 years, there's not been a great track record of quarterback play overall in Chicago. There have been some good Jay Cutler moments. There was some good Kyle Orton moments. Mitch Trubisky had a flash in 2018. Justin Fields had some electric plays. But just the level of consistency that I think fans were expecting or hoping for from a lot of highly touted picks, going back to when they had Cade McNown in the late 1990s. Eric Kramer had some record-setting seasons, but that doesn't say a lot for Bears quarterback play. They're the only franchise in NFL history without a 4,000-yard passer. So all of these things kind of play into a major dichotomy of how people feel around the city right now. Now, I'm exposed to a lot of my friends who are really pumped about this, who are all in on it. But I also know there are people who are trying to be as cautious as possible about how they feel about it. Maybe they're trying to temper their own expectations, which is understandable because every rookie quarterback is going to struggle at some point. It might happen in game one against what I think is a pretty solid first line of the Tennessee defense. Their depth chart doesn't go super deep into the 2s and the 3s with a lot of depth, or at least quality depth, but I think their 1s are really good. So it's not going to be an easy game. And this is going to be, as I've been saying for the last couple of months, every game that Caleb Williams plays from here on out will be the hardest defense he's seen because it's all NFL players. And each week, somebody's going to get more tape on you, get your tendencies a little bit more and a little bit more as more data and video become available of you. I think there's a more polarizing feel in this city than I initially would have thought. I thought it was going to be puppy dogs, rainbows, and lollipops. And all of a sudden, people I think are trying to be a little bit more cautious, and I understand why.
I completely get the point of that, of trying your best to protect yourself, but we're about to be knee deep in this thing. I don't know how much it's fine before the games start, but I don't know how long you can stick to that once we see how good or maybe how bad Caleb Williams can be. If you're a Titans fan, I promise you we're not going to ignore that side of this, but it's a rare opportunity to get some true insight into the Bears, because not just are you calling this game, Adam, you as well did the preseason in Chicago. If you watched Hard Knocks this summer, you heard Adam's voice doing these preseason games for the Bears. I'm just curious for your take on what you've been able to see from the Bears, because okay, we get Caleb, but also this is a make or break year for Matt Eberflus. It wasn't a guarantee that he would be able to oversee this. There was thought that the Bears might move on and get a completely new head coach. There's obviously a lot of hype around this very talented defense as well. Just what are your vibes from spending time around the Bears about where they are and what they think they're capable of this season?
I think the players, if you ask any of these players and whether they're truly speaking, how they feel or not, they're all saying the thing that I think fans are hoping comes to fruition. We believe in this guy. So that's the Caleb aspect of it, right? We've heard it from multiple players, from veterans, from rookies. We've heard it from coaches all preseason long. This guy's the real deal, at least in terms of talent. Now it's about execution, which is, as we said, case for any quality player that is making his foray into the NFL. I think because of where the defense finished last year, I think this was a progressively improving defense a season ago that had a lot of tumult early. The Alan Williams resignation with weird circumstances surrounding that, Matt Eberflus having to take over play calling, which he admitted to us, to our football crew on Fox that had him a little bit later in the year and had him multiple times. He admitted to us that he felt he was struggling out of the gate as the defensive play caller because it's not something he was expecting to do. And then all of a sudden he got more comfortable. The addition of Montez Sweat midway through the season completely shifted what type of pass rush this team could deliver on a more consistent basis. They only had 30 sacks last year, but I think 20 of them came after Montez Sweat joined the team. So not only his 6+ sacks or whatever it was, but the impact he had on other guys to be able to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks was impactful. So this was an improving defense as the year went on last year. And I don't think they got worse. Jalen Johnson's now locked in at the cornerback position for the next few years. Tyreek Stevenson was a rookie last year. They spent a high pick on him. I thought he had a very high quality season. Their safeties are homegrown, or their safety and nickel, I should say, in Brisker and Gordon are homegrown. They signed Kevin Byard, the former longtime Tennessee Titan, who I thought had an exceptional career in Tennessee and really brings a veteran presence that they lost when Eddie Jackson wasn't re-signed. I have little concern about their linebackers in Edmonds and Edwards. And I think their front is solid if they can get some help from Montez Sweat on the other side with what I think will be, a trio of guys, Darrell Taylor, who they just got from Seattle, Austin Booker, who they got in the 5th round, who didn't get a chance to play a lot of college football, but had a really nice year as a transfer at Kansas last year. DeMarcus Walker's a veteran at this point. So, I'm rattling off a bunch of names, but it's names that Bears fans are familiar with. And I think more fans around the NFL will start to get a little bit more comfortable with, because I think they're going to hear more about this defense early because the defense is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting, I think, in the first half of the season as the offense starts to ramp into form.
Austin Booker is such an interesting name because you see the Bears trade up for him in the draft and you're like, is trading up for a mid-round pick really the best use of resources? And then you get to the preseason, which you called, and I get that it's preseason. I know you got to see it in the regular season as well, but looks like a very intriguing pass rusher for the Chicago Bears, which I'm going to put you on the spot, and I know you're good for it because you did. I mean, you rattled off every name worth being excited about on this team. But if I tell you that you can't say Caleb Williams, who is a Bears player that you are very intrigued or very optimistic could have a big time season there this year?
I think DeAndre Swift, and I know, Rome Odunze is an easy choice in there because, again, he's another top 10 pick that is, hoping to forge a real strong connection with this quarterback. But I think DeAndre Swift, you cannot forget about how important the running game is for this Bears team. Shane Waldron comes over from Seattle. He spent 3 years there. We know what he did with Russell Wilson in 21. And I think more notably what he did in 2022 with Geno Smith, getting him to comeback player of the year and bringing his career essentially back to life after he had been, essentially a journeyman backup. His philosophy is about balance and attack. And balance meaning like NFL average is 55% pass, 45% run, which obviously over the last 20 years has shifted. Used to be more run than pass, but we're in a time right now where it's, more than 50% pass. If you can get 50-50 and get solid productivity out of the running game, which I think for the most part, the Bears have had the last couple of years. Now, granted, a lot of that was Justin Fields in some design runs, in some scramble runs, in some impressive improv situations. But I think you need to have some balance. Khalil Herbert is a solid number 2 back. He had a really good year 2 years ago. He and Tony Pollard, who's now a Tennessee Titan, they were number 1 and 2 in yards per carry a couple of seasons ago. His average dropped last season, but it was still above what the league average is. League average is about 4.4. He was around 4.7, 4.8. And DeAndre Swift comes over after what I thought was a really solid season with Philadelphia in, what was kind of an up and down year for their offense. I thought he still had a really productive season, and we know what he did in Detroit. He was a solid player there too. So I think his impact needs to be felt fairly early for obvious reasons. A, you want to run the football and be productive in the running game, but you need to help out this young quarterback too. One of the things that Matt Eberflus talked about was, hey, all this hype surrounding Caleb Williams, we know he has talent. He commands the offense really surprisingly well for a rookie player, but everybody else still has to play well around him. And I think that starts with the offensive line blocking for what I think is probably the second most important player on offense, and that's DeAndre Swift.
I think it's such a solid point that, DeAndre Swift was 1,000-yard rusher for Philly and was one of the first targets of the Bears offseason, like one of the first guys they prioritized bringing onto this team. It does feel like he's a little bit of an afterthought behind all this star power in the passing game, which I understand, but I am interested to see how that goes. All right, now I did say we would talk about the other side of this. And Adam, I think this is such an unfair draw for the Tennessee Titans, not in terms of like how the game's going to go, but this is an exciting team in its own right. Like I thought about this while I was prepping. This is a new team with a lot of veteran players that weren't there the year before, ascending O-line, veteran pass catchers. They get a big name running back in free agency, a lot of talent on defense, and it's all just about a young, unproven quarterback. Now, that sounds exactly like the Chicago Bears, does it not? Except it's also the Tennessee Titans, who just seem, because Will Levis isn't the number 1 overall pick and because we saw him last year, getting nowhere near as much as the publicity. But I am excited to see what this team is capable of with Will Levis having so much talent around him.
I think, having that trio of wide receivers that, we're going to talk plenty about the Bears receivers, right? Their trio of Allen and Moore and Odunze. Tennessee's got a really solid, more veteran group of receivers. I know Allen's been around for a long time. DJ Moore's been around for a while, but they have a rookie mixed in there. Whereas you have DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Boyd, guys who I think, obviously Hopkins is potential future Hall of Famer. Calvin Ridley, before the gambling issues, has proven he's a really capable receiver, and he got a lot of high praise from his coaching staff during the preseason. I've always been a fan of Tyler Boyd in Cincinnati. And he comes over with the new head coach, Brian Callahan, who's the OC in Cincinnati the last couple of years. Obviously, Zach Taylor is the play caller, but Brian jumps into a play calling role. He is in a first-time head coaching job. He's got a guy that he trusts in Nick Foles as his offensive coordinator, a guy that's been with him a long time in various spots. I think they were high school teammates, if I'm not mistaken. So I got to double check on that as we get deeper into the prep this week. But I'm intrigued by how Levis is going to play, knowing that he has really 3 strong, solid options to go to. Chigo Okonkwo, their main tight end, had a solid jump from year 1 to year 2 last season, and he's expected to take on a bigger role. I like Josh Wiley as a backup. And like we said, Tony Pollard is more than capable. Again, he oftentimes played second fiddle in Dallas. I think this is a great opportunity for him. Like I said a couple of years ago, granted in a number 2 role, he led the NFL in yards per carry by almost 1.5 yards, better than league average. So I think he's a very capable runner. This offensive line is a big question. It's a very low rated offensive line, but I think you use the right word. It's a rising offensive line. J.C. Latham was the trench king at Alabama, right? This guy moves from right tackle in college to the left tackle spot in the NFL. It's a big responsibility. Peter Skoronski was a high pick last year out of Northwestern. So that back-to-back years, they're trying to beef up their offensive line. Lloyd Cushenberry played a lot of football at center in Denver the last 4 years. They get Petit Frere back, hopefully healthy at right tackle. Like, these guys are all important, and if they play well together up front, give Will Levis some time. Maybe you see a jump from what was the worst completion percentage in the NFL among qualifiers last year. I think it was 58%. League average is 65. Like, that's way too low. But with 3 weapons plus a guy like Pollard who can do some damage out of the backfield, maybe in the passing game too, and a tight end that's rising as well, if this offensive line plays well, I think Tennessee is a very interesting team in the AFC South, a division that is outside of Houston. And, knowing Jacksonville's quarterback situation, because we know Trevor Lawrence, it's still a lot of question marks, I think, in that division. I don't think it's locked in for one team or another. I think that's going to be a wide open division this season.
You run into trouble if you try to predict things too boldly, but Brian Callahan's the head coach in Tennessee. One of the hires of the offseason was getting his father, Bill Callahan, onto that staff. Like, I feel very, very confident Bill Callahan is going to turn that offensive line into a nice unit. And if that's the case, Tony Pollard certainly should have a nice season. And I don't know for sure, but I'm at least excited to see what Will Levis can do with a real supporting cast next to him.
I think this is a better team than we give it credit for. And again, maybe it's not even that we're discrediting them. It's just the hype isn't there. Like, we're not, jacked up about this Tennessee team. They missed the playoffs the last couple of years. They had a really, up and down run the last couple of seasons with Mike Vrabel, who overall I thought was a really, strong head coach. I think there was some surprise at some point as to, why is Mike Vrabel not the head coach anymore? I think some people were a little bit surprised by the move, but all that being said, their defense is still really solid. I don't know where the depth is for this team on either side of the ball, on offense or defense, but I think the ones, it's a really good group. I think Sebastian Joseph Day comes over after a weird finish in Los Angeles. I think he had a game or two with San Francisco. They draft Tavondre Sweat in the second round to beef up their nose tackle spot. Tier Tart leaves in free agency. Jeffrey Simmons is a quality player. Harold Landry is a quality player. Ernest Jones has been top 5 in tackling before from the linebacker spot in the NFL. I think getting Quandre Diggs is a big deal. When you lose Kevin Byard, I know they traded him midway through the season last year to Philly, but that was a big loss for them with a veteran presence at free safety. Go get Quandre Diggs, a guy who's played a lot of football for Seattle. If Jamal Adams can be healthy, we know that he's a good player when he's healthy, just has to be there. So I think there's quality across the board on the defensive side of the ball, and maybe more than we're giving it credit for.
One last one for you, and it's the most loaded question possible, but it could be Sunday. We don't have to get into the entire season because we're here now. We're not projecting anymore. We're about to start playing. But what does it need to look like for Caleb Williams? Again, like you mentioned, how high the hopes are. People are guarding themselves against disappointment. What do you think it needs to look like for Caleb Williams early here to kind of keep things on track with this very eager, very anxious Bears fan base?
Well, he missed some reads, right, in the preseason. There were a couple of passes. He didn't officially record an interception. Played 43 snaps, I think, in his 2 games. Didn't officially record an interception, but a couple of them probably should have been picked. One, I think, got taken off the board because of a penalty. He missed some things. And again, rookie quarterback, they all do. I was watching, I saw a clip of Travis Kelce on their podcast talking about how Pat Mahomes admitted that when he was a rookie, he couldn't read a defense. There's a lot of growing pains at this position, even for guys as elite as Patrick Mahomes. So look where he's at, almost a decade later. It takes time to build the foundation. So I don't want fans, whether it's in Chicago or elsewhere, to overblow what could be turnover issues out of the gate. But if he limits those, I think that's the best possible sign for what the trajectory of this offense could be. I think eventually they're going to be really good. I just think there's too many weapons. I think they've done a good job building depth on the offensive line, and they've gotten key pieces at every spot to help Caleb Williams out. I don't think this offense is going to be bad for very long if it is bad. But I think Williams can get there quicker, or at least show a trajectory of getting there quicker if he's not turning the ball over, if all the operations are clean, which in the preseason, which is kind of what you're looking for if you're a head coach and a coordinator, is the operation mechanically clean. And that was the case for 43 snaps. So I have a good feeling about where they'll eventually be, but I think they can get there quicker, and it'll look like they're about to get there quicker if he's not turned the ball over and if he's commanding the offense the way we thought we would see him do.
It's going to hinge on 2 young, unproven quarterbacks, but I won't be surprised if this is one of the, banger games of week 1. I'm so excited to see it. Supposed to be a beautiful day on the Lake Michigan lakefront. I could not be more hyped for this. Adam Amin will be on the call with Mark Sanchez on Fox. Adam, we appreciate the time as always, my man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
One last matchup to get to on today's show, and it's the Monday night game. Talked about it before. The New York Jets traveling to face the San Francisco 49ers. You talk about statement games. This feels like one of the biggest ones in week 1. Not for the 49ers. We know what they're all about. They've got their stars back. But a huge chance for the New York Jets with Aaron Rodgers to announce themselves and see if they're worth the hype we've been giving them all offseason. It's a big matchup, and this Victory Unlocked is brought to you by Zillow. Agents, tours, loans, homes. And like I said, I want to focus on the Jets side of this, not as a knock to the Niners, but again, Trent Williams is back. Brandon Ayuk is back. Short of injury, do we have any reason to believe the Niners will take any kind of step back? This is a team that's reloading on their 2023 roster and doubling down in a chance to win a Super Bowl. I think we all understand that. My only real questions, conditioning, health. Do we need to worry about soft tissue injuries? Does it matter that Trent, Christian McCaffrey, and Brandon Ayuk didn't really have training camps? My guess is going to be no, but it does bear watching. I looked this up. 49ers had 7 All-Pros in 2023. The average age is 29.8. So this is a bit of an aging roster. Don't yell at me, Niners fans. Something to watch. But again, let's take a look at the Jets side of this, and something that I really want to focus in on. Of course, Aaron Rodgers is going to draw all the eyeballs. But if I'm watching one thing in this matchup that might help the Jets get a win, it's this New York starting offensive line, which I went back and looked. Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Joe Tippmann, Elijah Vera Tucker, Morgan Moses. That's your starting 5 up front for the New York Jets, 3 of which are new to the team, were acquired in the offseason. Here's their preseason snap log. 8 snaps for the New York Jets starters on the offensive line, and all 8 of them were played by Joe Tippmann, the young center. Nobody else on this starting 5 got any work in the preseason. Of course, they got plenty of practice time. They did joint practices with several teams. Not trying to say they haven't played together. But Levi's Stadium on a Monday night against the reigning NFC champs is a bit of a different animal. I think this is going to be a very interesting test. There's so much talent here. Tyron Smith, a perennial All-Pro, one of the best left tackles in football. Morgan Moses did a very solid job for the Baltimore Ravens, as did John Simpson. But playing together, working in tandem, communicating, being on tops of stunts and games and switches. Who's got that guy? Where's he coming from? This is a Jets defense that knows how to create pressure. It's one thing you can count on Robert Saleh to do is coach a hell of a defense. And the season essentially rides on it. Remember, Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles evading pressure from the Bills in this game last year. Ironically, he was evading pressure from Leonard Floyd, who plays for the 49ers now. This is obviously a really great front. Floyd, underrated player. Nick Bosa, one of the absolute best in the game. Javon Hargrave, one of the most underrated and disruptive defensive tackles in football. They're going to be trying to get after Aaron Rodgers. Of course, the Jets have to feel good about their offensive line. They brought all these guys in. First-round pick Olu Fashanu played 58 snaps in the preseason and was a good player. Right now, you feel good about this position. I think it's a position of strength for New York. Still different when you're going up against a defense of this caliber. Nick Bosa honestly had a down year. Remember, he was the one staging a holdout last year. He didn't come back to the practice field until the week before the season opener. Even in a down year, he still finished with 10.5 sacks. I would expect he is back up closer to his defensive player of the year caliber a year removed from that holdout. The Niners love to rush 4. They love to just win with their main guys. I don't see them bringing a ton of extra pressure. It's just about how well do the New York Jets hold up, and can they do it on the road against a great team in what promises to be a lit environment. I think it's going to be so interesting. And yeah, Rodgers needs to play well, but how well he plays might just depend on those 5 guys up front and how quickly they can get things together. It's the one thing I want to watch in this game. I'm so excited for it. Aaron Rodgers back from that Achilles injury. We will see just what the New York Jets are all about soon. We're almost done with our week 1 preview, but there are still 10 games on the slate. Like I said, it's a loaded show. Never fear. This is what we call our hurry up offense. If you're new to the show, at the end of every preview episode, we're going to take you through the rest of the matchups, the down the line games, if you will, the ones we haven't had time for. We're going to do it as quickly, as efficiently as possible. We'll give you a nugget, a tidbit, something to watch as you head into your weekend. We're going to do it in 2 minutes or less, thereabouts. My wonderful producers are about to put 2 minutes on the clock. It's been a long off season. We'll see exactly how close I can come. I think I can do it. So let's get started right now with a playoff rematch. LA Rams at Detroit Lions. Matthew Stafford is going to get the headlines. I'm telling you, the Lions' revamped secondary is the thing to watch. I think that's the key to a Super Bowl run. Jared Goff, 7-0 against the spread as a starter in week 1. Give me the Lions. Arizona Cardinals at Buffalo Bills. It might not look like it. The Cardinals offense is going to be a tough test for this new look Bills defense. 48.5 is the over-under, tied for third highest number of the week. A lot of points. Texans at Colts. CJ Stroud in 5 games against the AFC South so far. 9 touchdowns, 0 picks. I think he keeps that going. I think the Texans win. Jags at Dolphins, a real narrative bowl in Miami. Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa both signed big deals this offseason. It's not fair. The loser's going to catch hell. I'm sorry to say it. Miami, 6-1 in September under Mike McDaniel. I think they keep that going. They just look different at the start of the year. Steelers at Falcons, the Arthur Smith Bowl. I think Arthur Smith will be good for the Steelers as the OC. I just think the Falcons right now are a better overall team at home. Give me Atlanta. Denver Broncos at Seattle Seahawks. Peep this stat. 5 games against rookie quarterbacks as Baltimore's DC. Mike McDonald went 4-1, allowing an average of 10 points per game. I know Seattle's defense isn't Baltimore's, but he's going to have something for Bo Nix. I'll take the Seahawks at home. New England Patriots at Cincinnati Bengals. Spread's 8.5. If Jamar Chase is playing, I think the Bengals cover easy. If he's not playing, I think the Bengals cover tough. Carolina Panthers at New Orleans Saints. Easy to bag on Derek Carr and the Saints, but Carr was 4-1 in his last 5 home games last year with a 117 passer rating. I do think the Saints win this game. Raiders at Chargers. Joe Alt going against Max Crosby in his NFL debut. Good luck, buddy. That said, Justin Herbert, 11 touchdowns, 1 turnover in his 4 home games against the Raiders. I didn't quite make it. I'll take the Chargers there. One last game, and then we're out of here. Minnesota Vikings at New York Giants. A superstar LSU receiver enters the season with massive expectations. A lot of fantasy managers riding on him, but who's going to throw him the ball? Am I talking about the Vikings or the Giants? You decide. It applies to both. I'll take the Vikings. Have no idea how to feel about it. Can't wait to see Justin Jefferson and Malik Neighbors square off. That does it for the show. I'll try to beat the clock next week. We've got so many more of these to go. We will be with you every week of the NFL season. We will be back on Monday to recap everything that happened in week 1, talk a little bit about that Niners-Jets matchup and what happens on Monday night, and off we go. So much to look forward to. The season is here. If you're not subscribed, do it. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Follow us on the socials at NFL on Fox Pod. We will be here for you all the way up to Super Bowl 59. And oh my gosh, I'm excited. Let's watch some football. We'll see y'all soon. Talk to y'all on the other side of the weekend. Have some fun. Yay, NFL. Yay, football. Goodbye.